And we start this hour in Ukraine, where the Interior Minister has quoted as saying 24 towns and villages have now been flooded after a major dam was destroyed in the south of the country. The Kremlin spokesperson has denied that Russia was responsible. Well, this video that was tweeted by Ukraine's President Zelensky shows the breached Kakhovka hydroelectric dam. Mr. Zelensky says that this confirms for the whole world that the Russians must be expelled from every corner of Ukrainian land. But the two sides have blamed each other for its destruction. Kyiv has accused Russia of blowing up the dam to slow Ukraine's offensive by making it hard to cross the Dnipro River. Russia says that Ukraine is to blame. But regardless of who or what caused the explosion, it has potentially deadly consequences for the towns and villages in the path of the water. BBC Verify is now working to establish the timeline of events, and there was already some damage to the dam before today's developments. We can see in these satellite images that were shared by the space technology company Maxar, a road that was visible in late May is no longer there, and these are images taken on Sunday. The substantial breach is also visible.
Listen to what they're saying. Listen to the coverage on this. It's not immediately saying, or at least as far as I've seen it, none of the coverage, suspiciously in the Western media, has immediately said that it's Russia that is responsible for this. And I think part of the reason why, like even NPR this morning was literally talking about how this might be the beginning of the counteroffensive that is supposed to be happening with Ukraine. Because blowing up a dam like this greatly restructures the battlefield. There could be a strategic interest for it, and they haven't figured out if it was actually the Russian side doing this or if it was actually the Ukrainian side doing this for strategic purpose or just regular wear and tear. If your immediate response is, oh, dude, this is like fucking, whenever a dam blows up, it's the enemy occupying force that does it. That's an understandable thing to think, but I don't know if that's the case. And I think that's part of the reason why the media has been like basically scrounging scrambling to basically fucking put together a cohesive narrative that they've been failing to do. I haven't seen much united narrative building that signals and puts the blame directly in the hands of Russia. And it is pretty interesting to see that in a situation like this, because blowing up a fucking dam is pretty devastating, especially because when you blow up a dam, you've basically flooded entire residential areas. Like people saying this helps Russia, but I'm also seeing people saying that it helps Ukraine. Russia has increased the water level behind the dam before the collapse to increase damage. That signals more that it's definitely on the Russian side. So here's one thing I will say. The best way to analyze this is what the actual impact on the battlefield is to Ukrainian soldiers and what the actual impact on the battlefield is to Russian soldiers in Russian positions. Because like Ukraine is not going to fucking blow up a dam that compromises their own fucking military positions. They're not going to do that. They're not going to blow up their own fucking dam and be like, oh, I guess it's a tactical misstep. Oops. Like that's too fucking idiotic. There are way too many Western analysts that are playing a significant role in this war for them to just go rogue and decide to do something so stupid that would, one, compromise their battle positions, and also on top of that compromise, obviously, like residential neighborhoods. So it's a unique predicament because on the one hand, the Ukraine defense minister stating that this is actually good for Ukraine just could be copium. Yeah, like I said, it could be absolutely Russians blowing it up, which is like probably, I would say Russians blowing this up is the highest probability because it's infrastructure damage in a nation that you're occupying. And then the Ukrainians doing this for a tactical advantage down the line is not unlikely as well, especially because it would flood their minds, especially because like it greatly disrupts the occupying forces, tactical advantages and plans that they put together. It flooded the Russian controlled side, not the Ukrainian side. Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is, even on the Russian controlled side, it could be utilized as an advantage by the Russians if the Russians are the ones who blew it up. Anyway, let's look at what the Western media is saying first, okay, and then we'll continue talking about this.
Well, as you say, there was signs of a breach in the dam over the weekend, but something happened overnight to result in a fairly catastrophic breach, which is now
it's back.
Perhaps as wide as 100 or 200 meters across. So whether that was the result of
Thank
an
God.
earlier damage and that resulted in a structural collapse, or
Look. First statement from the BBC. First line of speculation from the BBC is not to immediately say this is absolutely fucking Russia's doing, but instead to speculate that this could have happened due to regular wear and tear. When they blew up the fucking the Nord Stream pipeline, when they blew that up, even then they immediately were like, oh, it's 100% fucking Russia that did it to themselves. And then we found out that that was not the case, which was like the most obvious fucking lie that everyone collectively was saying. I find that to be interesting. I think that's huge. Then explain why a chunk of a road was demolished day prior. Dude, I'm not even in the business here of saying that this is Ukraine that did it to themselves. I'm simply, because I do think that it very likely could have been Russia. Much more likely than the Nord Stream situation, right? It's still very weird that like the BBC is first speculation is not to immediately say it's Russia, but instead to say maybe it was structural damage. These guys, a lot of these guys basically get their fucking talking points from the State Department, or they're operated by, similar material interests in this. I don't think it was regular wear and tear. We all know that already. But it's weird that they would even suggest that instead of saying, oh, it's definitely Russia. It's definitely Russia. Especially because this seems like a significantly more believable Russian demolition plan than the fucking Nord Stream situation, where they very quickly jumped and said Russia. Why? I find that to be very strange. There's a cooling nuclear station. Crimea was 8 years without water and again lost it. Minefield on the RF side are all gone. All defense positions and ammo gone. Water mirror near nuclear station will be gone, and you don't need to have to swim for a mile. I don't know this last part, but the minefield on the Russian side that they've laid down as a defensive for the counteroffensive attacks that Ukraine was slated to. It has been basically like slow revealing, like a boyfriend reveal on the fucking timeline. That's like supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen anytime. It's supposed to literally start happening. I don't know when it's actually going to officially happen. This explosion or this collapse, remember, they're calling it a collapse. They're not even calling it like a controlled demolition or an explosion, which again, very weird. Just remember that. Why is the Western media calling this a collapse and not immediately saying that like Russians did it? Warger says, why would Russia do this and cut off Crimean water? Argument is stupid because it completely ignores A, Ukrainian territories in Kherson where a bunch of people live will be flooded, and B, it will slow down or completely make the counteroffensive in Kherson impossible, not to mention this dam was literally on the front line and Ukraine was likely going to regain it sometime in the future. This also most likely destroys the viable land for agriculture. I don't know how that fucking land, I don't know how much agricultural output comes from the immediate region there, but like this destroys it for many, many years. I don't know how the fuck, I don't know how you would like say that this is, it flooded the right side of the Dnieper River, which is under Ukrainian control and is lower on the sea level than the left side, which is Russian controlled. I like that there are people in the chat saying literally the exact opposite things of one another.
You know, it resembles me the letter of Nazi leader Himmler that he sent in 1943 to then governor, so-called governor of Ukraine, when they were retreating from the Ukrainian territory. In his letter, he said that, look, we need to leave a scorched earth in Ukraine, kill everything, including even animals. So Putin and his policy is a copycat scenario of Nazi policy.
They're still just calling each other Nazis, huh? Yeah, and the irony, of course, is that there are literally actual fascists on both sides of the battle. Like literally, you got a bunch of fucking Russian Nazis doing Nazi shit, and then you got a bunch of Ukrainian Nazis also doing the same. So that's why it's like, you know, you say that, but okay, like they're having a Naz off. Ultimately, though, yes, you are correct. One side is invading, and the other side is defending themselves from invasion. So let's make that clear, okay? the personal ideologies of the people that are on the defensive side is an entirely different subject for an entirely different time, which will lead to plenty of complications. It already has, but it will lead to plenty of fucking complications down the line for Ukraine in general. But we haven't even gotten to that point yet, because a lot of those guys on the defensive side are too busy trying to not fucking die and, defend themselves. When they have no such interest, or when that defensive position goes away and they're no longer needed to defend the country, well, then it'll be an issue. But we're not there yet. Do you think that maybe the media's reluctance to ascribe responsibility comes from overcompensating for how wrong they were with Nord Stream? Fuck no. Are you kidding me? This is war. The entire purpose of the media is to portray it as whatever they think is the most effective propaganda for Ukraine, for Western media, and the same goes for Russian media. Russian media's entire purpose, doesn't matter if they get it wrong, they have no obligation to get it right. What they have an obligation for is whoever is on their side, to make them look good, okay? That's the only obligation they have. That's why I'm saying, like, it's really important the way that they're portraying the situation and not immediately rushing to the conclusion and, like, directly pointing the blame on Russia. I find that to be very, very interesting. And the only reason why I think, despite the fact that I do think that Russia, it seems, has more to gain from blowing this up, it seems like it immediately. And I did not, if you recall, ever say that about the Nord Stream pipeline explosions, where, it was like very obvious. Like it felt insane to me that people were like, oh, this is definitely Russia. And I was like, no, the fuck it's not. You're out of your mind. In this circumstance, the fact that they are not immediately rushing to that conclusion is definitely curious. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, because like I said, I do think that it seems more like it was an operation conducted by the Russians. But I do find it odd that they wouldn't say that they didn't immediately rush to that conclusion. Media approaches this with skepticism, since both sides heavily utilize disinformation strategies in their military planning. It's a vestige of Soviet tactics. Here is the reason why I think it's interesting. It's not zero sum. Like, blowing up this dam is not literally only good for Russia and only bad for Ukraine. It seems like either because it's copium, or because they want to make the best out of a horrifying situation, both sides have basically said, like, oh, this is not the worst for us. It's actually the other side that, like, did it. But even then, it kind of, they owned themselves. You know what I mean? Like, Russia's position is that Ukraine did this to themselves, and it's actually a major own for themselves. Look at these fucking idiots, right? Whereas the Ukrainian position seemingly is the same, where they're saying Russia did this, but, like, it actually flooded their fucking defensive positions right before we were supposed to do a counteroffensive. You guys fucking suck. You're so stupid. Normally, the media would rush to take up the position that, like, Russia is single-handedly and completely responsible for this. This is the first time I've seen a situation where they aren't saying that. And the only time you hear that is usually after the fact, a couple months after the media has, like, engaged in some level of misinformation, like the Nord Stream pipeline explosions, to basically say, oh, well, maybe it was actually, people with loyalties to Ukraine that did it. Who knows? That never comes in the beginning of the speculative process. The beginning of the speculative process is usually just, like, single-handedly blaming Russia. HasanAbi, listening to this bullshit reasoning as a Ukrainian who experienced this shit right now horrible is the Russian side. And our government immediately told the Russians blew up the dam. Thousands of lives, zoos are just underwater. Thousands of animals dead. I don't disagree with you. I'm talking about the BBC's analysis. Western media usually does not shy away from just saying that it's fucking Russia. Look at this. Look. You don't think this is unique in the grand scheme of things? It does not matter what your perspective on this war is, right? And you know what my perspective on this war is. I mean, I think that it is unjustifiable, incredibly cruel. It's fucked up. Russia is responsible for it, for the invasion. They should not have done that, clearly, okay? But the fact that the Biden administration cannot say conclusively who was responsible for the massive breach of the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine is interesting. It's different than what they have done before. Same happened when the Ukrainian air defense missiles killed the Polish civilians. Yeah, it's strange. And I don't know if it's because they want to, like, cool the temperature, because, like, this is a massive fucking war crime either way, or I don't know, or because, like, it might have been a Ukrainian strategic assessment on the one hand, they're saying this. On the other, they're also directly pointing, like the Reuters news report that we looked at, U.S. intelligence points to Russia being behind the Ukrainian dam attack. You are basing all of this off of one dude's report? No, I'm not. Look, I don't know what the fuck happened. I think it's most likely Russia. But having said that, I only know one thing, and that's media analysis. And I'm looking at fucking what the media is saying, and it is very different, and what the State Department is saying, and that's very different than what they normally say in a situation like this. It could also potentially be that they wanted to, I don't know, they wanted to like cause minor flooding, and then the infrastructure didn't hold up, and it became like a major issue. But I don't know. I don't know how fucking dam demolition would work. Ukraine accused Russian forces of blowing up the Kakhovka Dam and hydroelectric power station, which sits on the Dnieper River in an area that Moscow has controlled for more than a year. Russian officials blame Ukrainian bombardment in the contested area. It was not possible to reconcile the conflicting claims. Russian and Ukrainian officials use terms like ecological disaster and terrorist act to describe the torrent of water gushing through the broken dam and beginning to empty an upstream reservoir that is one of the world's largest. The environmental and humanitarian consequences quickly became clear as homes, streets, and businesses flooded downstream, and emergency crews began evacuations. Officials monitored water for cooling systems at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and authorities expressed concern about drinking water supplies in both Ukrainian and Russian-controlled areas. Especially because, like, it does actually impact both sides of the fucking war. There's no way it's an accident. I don't think it's an accident. But it is weird. It's such a fucking weird situation. I don't know don't say fucking five-head when I say both sides. It literally does impact both sides. I don't know why they're not immediately blaming Russia. It's weird. Yeah, I think the major part of this is that I feel like the reason why I land more on the Russia side, and I might be totally wrong on this, but the reason why I land more on the Russian side doing this, regardless of what the media is saying, which puts me, I guess, like, more anti-Russia than the media, which is a weird thing to say, is because I feel like if they were to have done this, they have more benefits. You know what I mean? Like, they seemingly have more benefits to this dam explosion than the Ukrainian side would. Like, it's a tactical misstep if Ukrainians did it, right? I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see when the American intelligence basically collaborates and communicates with Ukrainian intelligence, or choose to reveal that this was not a strategic blunder, but instead a deliberate explosion from Ukrainian weapons or whatever down the line, and talk about how brilliant it was tactically speaking when they do like this incredible amphibian assault or something like that. You know what I mean? If that's the case, then that is what will come. I don't know how relevant the Russian defense on the coast are, considering that most of the Russian forces are not stationed near the coast, and Kherson was lightly garrisoned by the Russians in general. Flooding the area makes sense because it makes Ukrainian offensive pointless. The land will be super muddy for a long time, and the area making offensive maneuvers hard. I agree. But again, that's why I said it's literally more beneficial for the Russians, which is why I think that this is certainly something that the Russians have the capability of doing and could have done. But I don't understand why the Western media is not united, and American authorities are not fucking united on that similar front, when even I think that is the case. When they have said it in moments where it literally didn't make sense, like the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. Who cares what the media says? What do you mean? The media gets their notes from insiders in the State Department, and the State Department is basically another, it's American intelligence, and American intelligence is absolutely involved in this war and have immediate, up-to-date information on what Ukrainians are doing and what they're planning. That's our trail to figure out what actually happened. That's why it's important to understand what the American intelligence and the American media or the Western media is saying in this regard. That's the only reason why I care about what the fuck they're saying, especially when what they're saying is like very different than what they have said in the past. Warger, I agree with you. I do think that it's not something that Putin would be above, like destroying a dam and flooding an area, especially if it offers a tactical advantage. I certainly think that would be the case. Ukrainian troops witnessed Russian soldiers being swept up in floodwaters and fleeing the east bank of the Dnieper River after the collapse of the Kakhovka Dam. Many Russian troops were killed or wounded in the chaos, an officer of the Ukraine's armed forces says. Ukrainian troops witnessed Russian soldiers being swept up in floodwaters. If anything, it's just like copium. You know what I mean? I think like it's more so that it's copium to like make the most of a horrifying situation. Like to be like, oh no, they fucking owned themselves actually. You know what I mean? By blowing up this dam, they like, the Russians owned themselves, I promise, type shit. You know what I mean? Because it very much could be that. This is a situation that you know is very hard to grasp like accurate information on, unfortunately. Message from locals in the middle of the night that may point to an external cause detonation, but could be mines around the water. Sorry for the auto-generated text. Ukraine with very specific accusation following up from the Southern Command's very general statement that this early morning is sign of responsibility. Russians very well may have deliberately blown up the dam, but I'm not sure this is the clear evidence for it, as all previous reports have the dam breaking 20 to 30 minutes prior. Explosion at Nowa Kakhovka Dam detected on the magnetometer in Bucharest, Romania, thanks to Yuri V. Koval and others for the time estimates. So the biggest explosion happens before like the dam break. Jeff with the most detailed thread I've seen so far on the dam. Interested to see any information is released on the explosive device used here, assuming one was used, which is looking more likely. The United States government intelligence has intelligence that is leaning towards Russia as the culprit of the attack on the dam in Ukraine, according to 2 U.S. officials and 1 Western official. Okay, maybe not. White House, we cannot conclusively say who's responsible for the Kakhovka Dam breach. So intelligence releases information saying that it is the Russians, and we have intelligence pointing to Russia as a perpetrator of the dam attack. And then shortly thereafter, they say we cannot conclusively say if it's them. This is my assessment as well from the way that they're fucking speaking about it. This is unique. No matter what your perspective on this war is, you cannot say that this is objectively a unique predicament in comparison to prior reporting on, you know, big moments of strategic interest. First, a little background on what be going on. Water levels plummeted in February and then surged in May to record highs. I think this is because Russia was not managing the dam. They left some sluice gates open on their side, which caused water levels to drop at the start of the winter, but after the spring rains, the gates weren't letting enough water through. In early May, water levels were so high that it started to overtop the dam. That means water was actually flowing through the sluice gates. Is that how you say it? Sluice gates? The dam had already been damaged in 2 previous incidents, a possible Ukrainian strike in late October, early November, a likely Russian explosive charge that blew up part of the roadway over the dam on the 11th of November. Dude, what the fuck? It's weird. The dam was already under enormous strain and damage. Then things got worse. On the 2nd of June, it looks like the road over the dam failed. That could be indicative of a larger structural failure. I made a short movie here using planet imagery. You can see that the road which runs over the dam was washed away between the 2nd and 3rd of June. That indicates to me that there were structural issues at the facility before whatever happened today. Holy fuck. Wait, is that why they're saying it could be possibly like structural failure? That would be, in this incredibly awful ecological disaster, that would be the funniest reason for why. Like a tragic comedy. Yeah, both Russia and Ukraine were shelling areas around the dam. It's possible that it was an accident, which would be the most insane outcome. Yeah. Negligence on either side of the equation, turning this into a blunder for both sides is quite literally the stupidest fucking possible reason for this to happen. No, it was not naturally caused infrastructure failure. It was bombed by both Ukrainians and Russians alike. So that's not natural. It's obviously possible that the Russians destroy the dam in the face of a new Ukrainian offensive. But given the recent past events at the dam, I think a structural failure coincident to the offensive cannot be ruled out, not yet anyway. Okay, so consequences. The first one is catastrophic flooding on the lower Dnieper River. I don't know enough about the hydrology to know how it'll play out, but Kherson and Nowa Kakhovka are the 2 biggest cities likely at risk. The second is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. The plant relies on Dnieper Reservoir for its cooling water. My previous reporting suggests if water levels fall below 13.2 meters, it will cause cooling problems. I'm not sure how hard that limit is. At the moment, the reactors at ZNPP are in cold shutdown. They still require cooling to move residual heat out of their cores, but it's at much lower levels than during the normal operation. So when the water levels drop below the critical limit, and they will in a matter of days or weeks, I suspect, it will not trigger an immediate nuclear crisis. However, I have no idea how the plant will be able to maintain cooling in perpetuity. Bottom line, this is really bad news for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The plant has already endured shelling, numerous blackouts, a major exodus of staff, and Russian military occupation. Now it's going into the summer without its main source of cooling water. And speaking of summer, that's the final consequence to think about. The Kakhovka Reservoir supplied irrigation and drinking water to the region, particularly Russian-held Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. This is going to ruin the crop and leave many cities without water. Final postscript, and then I'm going back to bed for a few hours. The canal that supplies water to Crimea has its intake just above the dam. However, as TASS reported last November, Russia has topped up Crimea's reservoirs, and there's no immediate crisis there. For the record, no one is saying that this is like purely natural, a natural phenomena. I think everyone understands that like there was already structural damage on it, and it could have overflown. There's 3 different possible reasons for how this happened. One is Ukrainian rocket or explosive teams, potentially, even though it's like literally Russia, it's Russian controlled, in an effort to, I guess, like flood Russian positions and cause Russian controlled territory and civilians living there, Ukrainian civilians, by the way, to flee. Second is Russia engaging in a controlled demolition, again, to flood the entire area without care or consideration for the people that they are that live in their controlled territory, which, by the way, I don't put it past them to do that. They definitely would do something like that. For making the entire areas that flooded impossible to traverse when the supposed Ukrainian counteroffensive is slated to launch literally around this time. I mean, they've been talking about this since April openly. Now, the last and perhaps the funniest, but also saddest, most insane reason would be that both sides have like both bombed it and have put explosive devices around it, which could have led to like accidental detonations and direct hitting the dam from afar, which paired up with like Russian mismanagement over the waters, over the regions that they control, created this like ecological disaster because the water basically broke through the dam ultimately. These three likely scenarios are Russia first, both sides second, and then Ukraine third. Okay, the likelihood of the responsibility here. And because they are still relatively close to one another with its impact and because like neither side really wins anything immediately, because of that, the media, I think, is like not giving us a conclusive, united, Russia did this to themselves narrative as you would normally hear. Why would Russia want to flood its own people and stop water to Crimea? Well, first of all, Russia has already, as this thread points out, dealt with the Crimean water supply even before this dam. The thread you were just reading said the explosion happened after the collapse. There might have been detonations after the collapse of the dam that exploded due to like explosives that they had placed there as like an exit strategy. You know what I mean? Like Russians, of course, they put fucking explosives on the dam so they could like potentially blow them up. You know what I mean? Blow it up as like a Hail Mary or some shit. Like that part is normal. And if there are explosions happening after the dam has collapsed, that strikes me as explosives that they had put there that detonated due to the dam collapsing.
Pointing the finger back is something that Russia often does, usually does, whenever this country is accused of anything, particularly by countries with which it is in conflict with, whether we're talking about the Salisbury poisonings or doping in sport or the war in Ukraine.
China's... That's a wild sequence of things that pair up with one another, okay? That's pretty funny. My man said, like doping, a uniquely Russian tactic. It's so funny. All right, we're moving away from the Russia situation. Obviously, as more information comes down, we will know more about who did it, why they did it. At the moment, though, there's a lot of confusion. I mean, it's reasonable to be confused about the situation because, like, there is no, like, immediate benefit to either side for doing this. And it's, like, devastating for controlled territories on both sides. So it does seem odd